Hello and welcome to another iceberg video and another retro ranking video where this time we're going to talk about the worst of Monstercat in 2020. This was not an easy list to make because it took some time to find enough songs that got on my nerves enough to make this list in the first place. I'll get into more detail with this in the best of 2022 for Monstercat, but that year was when the new artist influx really started to take roots. You may have already seen some videos about it. For 2020, with a smaller, more organized roster, it's usually more predictable and more reliable than other years. I haven't paid much attention to the best stuff of that year, and I struggled to come up with a theme for this list. I will say this though, most of my worst lists have leaned towards the uncaged side of the label, but this one is probably the most balanced between Uncaged and Instinct. So for those who haven't seen my ranking videos before, this list will have one track per artist and it will be originals only. No dishonorable mentions this time, we're just going straight into the list proper. So without further ado, let's talk about the top 10 worst Monstercat songs of 2020. Number 10. So for context, let's travel to 2023. The first year I started making ranking videos and one of the biggest down years for the Instinct label. The new schedule prioritized Uncaged and had it to where Instinct only released once per week. And oftentimes it was a bland commercial house release that would be forgotten the next day. That was until November, where Instinct not only showed creativity again, but brought along three massive returns: Haywire, Just a Gent, and Dactyl. Haywire eventually made my best list in 2025. Just a Gent was close to making my honorable mentions with his return and has since experimented around with Uncaged as well. But Dactyl, on the other hand, I'm still not sold on to this day. I've tried hearing out some of Dactyl's music on Bitbird, and there was not a lot that clicked for me even over there. He certainly fits with that softer, more mellow sort of tone, but within most tracks I've heard, something just felt off in terms of execution, especially where it mattered most. Within both this song and his 2023 return Fever, there were some likable elements, don't get me wrong. He's really good at providing an atmosphere in the breaks, and the vocal mixing here is quite good as well. But it's ultimately the drops that ruin the song's momentum. It's more minimalist this time around, but doesn't do too well with what it has. The LFOs on the warble within the bass feel very slapdash, and the guitar-like synth is just so randomly executed. It's mostly triplets, but they're difficult to catch onto due to its offbeat timing. And there's simply not much else to make up for it in these drops. I knew putting Fever in my dishonorable mentions would be a hot take, but this only further confirms my reasons why. Number 9. There are some artists on this list and in this era of Monstercat that have stuck around and provided some notable songs, for better or worse, in the years after. Take for example, Kuro. While I haven't paid much attention to his earlier work, there were some great songs from 2021 onward like Deal, Damage, and Tokyo Drift. In 2020 though, not so much, and it eventually became a question of which song it was going to be. It was between this and Warning Signs with Hex Cougar. It took some time for Hex Cougar to click, especially with his Embody EP providing a similar style at some points, and it didn't take until the EP after to do so. But this song is on Kuro, and on McCall as well to an extent. The mysterious, darker tone just doesn't fully work for me throughout. The lyricism from McCall feels like it's telling two completely different stories at once, and the key into that aforementioned darker tone only makes it more unappealing. And drop-wise, it's even worse there. It's a slower brand of Moobaton that feels like a chore to get through with the scuffed droning of the lead synth. And here's the kicker, it just replicates the melody of McCall's hook all the way through. Feels like this kind of drop had little options to begin with, but the nature of the song throughout is just not for me all around. This gun is out of bullets now. Number 8. You know, usually a blander song doesn't get on my nerves as much, but maybe it's a case of expectations here. With this artist getting some acclaim on the label, mostly with his Where You Are EP, as well as some off-label songs like Tell Me You Love Me and Baddest Behaviors, so what exactly is this? For Throttle to return to Monstercat carrying a run of live set material from outside of the label and eventually making the most out of it in 2019, 2020 was such an underwhelming year in comparison, with this being his only release. A slower-paced blend of house and synthpop that doesn't have any sort of momentous occasion or intrigue around it. With the title like Heroes, you would expect the song to be big, instead it's anything but. Nico Lizzy's vocals are fine, but there isn't any creativity in the main elements of the production. The lead stack of the drops doesn't provide any appeal or energy, and the rest of the production is basic. And like She's Got a Gun, it's too closely connected to the hook melody, making the song even more one-dimensional. It's an example of an absence of good. Little to offer from an artist who has made much more exciting work both on and off the label. Safe to say there weren't any heroes in this one. Number 7. And speaking of absolutely lethargic, the very last change I made to this list was bringing in this song, and really I don't know why I looked past it when I heard it before. Nonsense arrived to the label in 2019 with a mixed bag of releases in quality and genre, with this release being the last of theirs on the label, oriented around future bass. At least it was shaping up to be that way. There are some solid elements in the break, with the plucks working well with the sub bass, and the vocals, while not consistently great, can find moments of their own approaching the drop. And I'll put drop in quotations here because this one's about as tame as you could get. The main lead sound is just clumsy in production, trying to go for a mellow style for no reason whatsoever. The atmosphere around it makes it feel more like another break with just added percussion. How is it that the vocals are the most energetic part of these drops? And for a song that's classified as future bass, why is the gulf in energy stronger outside of the drops? It's a waste of momentum more than anything, and while it isn't their absolute worst on the label, it's probably one of their laziest ones. Number 6. A kind of song that feels extra deserving of being on a list like this is one that has really good breaks, countered by really bad drops. I've seen it in Eurofunk, I've seen it in raw style, and it's a sort of disappointment that hits differently. And if you want the Monstercat song where the gulf between the drops and off drops feels most like night and day, it's this. Within early impressions of Roman Silver, most of his work has been more electropop oriented. All he's had on this label is his Forever Flame EP, where the only song that feels somewhat worth revisiting is Friends. Now, with Skin, there are some good things in the breaks. Beach Season flows well with the guitars and the ambience, and the flutes, while they may feel a bit repetitive in that first break, they're a pretty nice touch overall. Generally, there's a lot of groove within the two different breaks. But wow, the drops are horrible. The best way I can describe the vocal chop leads is that they sound like microphone lag. He's also tried using this style in Get Lost, and I have absolutely no idea why. And the second drop goes for a very slow-paced trap switch-up that takes away even more groove and atmosphere. Again, the off drops providing potential, only for the drops to waste it all. And I suppose while we're on the topic of vocal chops that ruin absolutely everything, number 5. There's a part of me that doesn't want to put this song this high. It's the leading artist's biggest song, it's one of Instinct's biggest songs, and it's one that I remember hearing back then during the summer job. I didn't have that many problems with it at the time, but then again, that was before I even started producing music. Revisiting this now, when there isn't that much competition, and the drop showcases the absolute worst of the artist in question, Sabai has gotten a lot of criticism in the Monstercat community. When you think of high-pitched vocal chops, this act and this song would often come to mind. It was difficult to figure out exactly where to place this, mainly because it would be dependent on how much Olivia Ridgely's vocals try to redeem it. There isn't much else outside of the vocals to note. It's a fairly basic production there with the piano and little else. Back then, I've mentioned a difference between emphatic and generic melodic dubstep or future bass. And a lot of this production, both in and out of the drops, leans more towards the latter, even down to the rocktronic buildup that feels all too predictable. But maybe it would have been better for the drops to stay in that rocktronic route instead of whatever this is. My main issue with the whiny vocal chops here is that with them being pushed forward in the mix, not only is it egregious to listen to, but there's a lack of cohesion on how exactly they're used. And the randomness in these vocal chops has largely been an issue for Sabai, and you could argue Hwang as well. This concept, from my perspective, is more hit or miss than you may think, but this is one of the biggest misses out there. Number 4. If there's one track from Coven I could see landing on a best list proper, it's Never Have I Felt This, which is on the NCS label. Look, I haven't picked out my favorites from Butterfly Effect as of yet, but for such a large and eventually oversaturated album from an artist that has mostly been centered around drum and bass, here's what I can say at the moment. Sometimes going one-dimensional and full sending on a specific genre can take away intrigue from an album or any run of form between releases. It's nice to experiment around with other genres every once in a while, even if it isn't always going to work. Coven doesn't often go overly heavy in their releases. At least, that hasn't been the case for their newer Moments in Everglow album. It's rare that they've gone for something dubstep-oriented as well, and given their more melodic style, you would expect more of the same here. But drop-wise, it takes a turn that I don't think should have been taken. With a bro step sound and a rough hover combining with a wall of noise that encapsulates the drop. The stutters afterward don't work at all, either directly after the wall of noise or near the end of the drop where it feels like it hesitates to even try and go melodic anyway. The vocal chops from Katie's angry shut my mouth line doesn't make matters any better in the drops or the build-ups. Again, it's a more experimental cut, but it's one where you can't help but wonder if it was even worth taking in the first place. Number 3. It hurts putting this song here because I think there was a lot of great material to come from this artist. In fact, he even made one of my best lists. Probably not the one you're thinking of. But once I went back and revisited this song, it rocketed up the list for me. At the moment, I think this is Tisoki's worst on the label, especially given how it's been pushed as one of his biggest singles. It's a borderline halftime trap song that has gotten some hype, and I'm not sure why. I guess there's a bit of a suspenseful tone to note in the break with the filtered out percussion and the re-space. But this is one of the worst drop concepts I've heard from Tisoki. With the impact kick and little else outside of some vocal chops that sound awful, especially with how the filters and resonance vary over time. And again, it gets even worse when it takes from a previous melody and has few notes within. The laser effects are the only thing trying to redeem the second drop, but that's difficult to do when the main bulk of these drops is so bad to listen to. The slow pacing makes it difficult to find better options, but these sort of drops take away any sort of potential, as has been a common theme in this list. I guess you could say this song went sideways in a hurry. Number 2. And now for arguably the biggest bro step mishap Monstercat had this year. When I go as far to consider Eptic a meme act when it comes to this label, I mean there is a lot of history and a lot of quality from this artist overall, but most of it isn't on Monstercat. It felt like a bunch of his music here couldn't really be taken seriously, and the meme effect only started being funny in 2021. If you could look past the creepy album cover here, you'll find yet another case where the song at least tries to pose a threat up until the drop. It feels like brostep at its most dated, where outside of the drums and bass line, the main elements include a stuttered screech, some growls that are just hastily utilized, and some cut-off swearing for absolutely no reason other than for the memes probably. It's a kind of brostep that feels bland, unpolished, and unattractive all around. Meme material as is, it's often a mixed bag when it comes to big labels, but it's the ones that seem like they teeter between meme songs and serious production that frustrate me the most here. But before we move on to the number one spot, I'd like to take a moment to advertise my other channels. Over on Iceberg Gaming, you can find my gaming content, which consists of various videos at the moment. And over on Iceberg Music, you can find my own releases. I've been doing both originals and remixes this year, so I'd really appreciate if you check them out. Also, I have a couple of sub-goals for the year, including ones for the newer Iceberg Reviews channel, so I'd appreciate all the support I can get. But with that out of the way, let's move on to number 1. Given the Brittum influx on Monstercat and the funk spam on NCS, it has been a while since a tech house song has topped my list. And spoilers, it might just happen at the end of the year. The easiest way to do so is to have nothing to offer and everything that just confirms what I can't stand about it. Beat It Up by Corolla is a big example of such, as is the infamous Calling For You by Vengeant and Octane. But representing the worst of tech house in 2020, it had to be this one. Tony Romero is a more interesting case given what he would go on to do, with his introspection album being the biggest highlight of his time on Monstercat. And was it needed, because his run of form heading up to it has been far from convincing. Within the same year, he had a bland deep house cut with Lover Us and a clumsy collaboration with GTA and Let Go. But no song embodies the worst of the tech house scene more than Stuck in Your Head. There's a monotonous, repetitive flow throughout the song, and when you've heard enough tech house from live sets and big-name talents, namely those who should absolutely know better, you can sense a template that is fairly difficult to escape. You've got a plucky bass line with an extremely repetitive melody, an unintriguing template in the percussion, and of course, the vocal sample. There's an irony in trying to get stuck in your head, and it's for all the wrong reasons. The small touch of the hi-hat effect that almost blends in with the vocal makes it even more jarring to listen to. From its lack of dimension to its absence of overall tone and emotion, this song simply has the least to offer in terms of any sort of appeal. And that is what makes Stuck in Your Head by Tony Romero the worst Monstercat song of 2020. And that'll wrap up this video. Let me know of your least favorites in the comments below, and let me know of any retro rankings you would like to see next time around. And as always, if you guys enjoyed, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you in the next video.